Welcome. Hello. It's a gorgeous, or at least it's gorgeous here in Albuquerque. We're recording in March, so we're supposed to see spring at some point. Maybe this is what that is. I don't believe in the calendar dates of seasons. I think those are made up. I think it's just what you feel. If you feel like it's spring, it's spring. But if we get a snowstorm tomorrow, I guess we're back to winter. There's no linear progression here.
Yeah, it's totally possible to get snow tomorrow.
I mean, that's what just happened in Taos.
Beautiful day followed by a snowstorm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then today it's back to, like, spring weather.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's the new season. It's just like whatever feels like happening. That's what it is.
Yeah.
All of our calendars will have to change. All of our I don't know if you guys ever grew up with April showers bring May flowers kind of. What is that?
It's
um
supposed to traditionally rain in
colloquialism.
April. Yeah, it's supposed to traditionally rain in April just so that I don't know. Here it's hard to say though, when the rain will come and when the plants will bloom.
Yeah, rain.
Sometimes they bloom in March.
Right, the rainy season in Mexico isn't a thing anymore. Or it
Mm.
is, but it's kind of I don't know. It's whenever. It's been weird. It's been very weird. Anyway, we are here today. We're recording with the incredible Nina Bar-Giora. Am I
Yeah, Giora, but you can just
Giora?
call me Nina B. Some people just call me Nina B.
Hey, I like that.
Nina B. It's a little cutesy for me, but that's what you want to take. I am full proponent of whatever you want to be called. This is what you're going to be called. So,
Cool.
Nina B, thank you for joining us today. We're going to have a very different discussion that we normally have about HSE, specifically the science test. But before we dive into that, please, why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay. Hi, my name is Nina. I work at Taos Education and Career Center at UNM Taos. I also work at Propel, but that's a different thing. Um, and I have been teaching HSE here since I think 2021. And that's kind of what we're talking about on the podcast today. I teach HSE, and that's kind of an amalgamation of a few different subjects, and that has kind of fluctuated over time based on like just how we're shifting things. And then I also am the adult educator in our healthcare IETs, so EMT basic and CNA.
Okay, so you said you're working since 2021. So are you like a COVID hire then? That's a weird
No,
phrase,
actually, let's see. It was right when everyone came back in person. So, like, actually, when I started working there in August, I guess, of 21, is that correct? Or is it 22? Oh my God, I don't even know. It must have been 21. So everyone had like just come back in person, and they were like, some of them were meeting in person for the first time or like working together in person for the first time. So yeah, so maybe I was kind of part of that because they were like, all right, we're going back in person. But I actually was finishing a master's degree online, and I did not expect to go back into education. I had worked in education for like a while before, and then I was just like taking a semester off from my master's, and I was like, I really need a job. And my partner saw this flyer at SIDS, and it was for like, science instructor for students for whom like traditional education, like, wasn't a good fit or didn't work, or who are, coming back to finish school, whatever. Like, I don't remember what the description was, but it's like the quote unquote non-traditional part is what appeals to me. Yeah. And then I was like, I don't know. Like, do you think I'm qualified? My partner's like, yeah, obviously you're qualified. What are you talking about?
that at home support is so key. I don't know where I would be if my partner wasn't like, yeah, you can do it, just go do it. You know?
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you said that your partner's a flyer at SIDS. Can you just tell us what that is?
Yeah, since it's just like it's almost like a supermarket that's like Whole Foods-esque. I don't think it's
Oh,
not quite as expensive as Whole Foods, but it's like, where you can buy like bulk granola and like, organic local goat cheese, like, stuff like that. It's like a
oh,
locally owned.
okay. So I thought it was like an acronym or something for a building, and I was like,
No.
no, it's a supermarket. Okay, okay. So
Yeah.
So kind of between the Sprouts, Whole Foods kind of level.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, in Taos. Cool. All right. And then you just been there ever since. All right.
Yeah. So like I started off just teaching the Science HSE a few hours a week. And then Kylie, she's like totally honestly the reason I like work here. She was like, we really want to get these IETs going. Are you interested in being full time and, teaching for like these IETs? And at the time it was just one. It was information technology. That one didn't really like continue, but anyway, so then so after teaching HSE for a few months part time, then I just became full time and like started with the IDTs and continuing HSE. So, yep, that's that story.
Wow. Okay. So I think we mentioned this on the podcast in previous episodes. It's like it could be pretty rare to be a full-time instructor in programs. So it's exciting to talk to you about that a little bit. So I know this wasn't a part of our prepared questions, but can you tell me a little bit about that experience of having like teaching as your full-time job in adult ed or alternative education, as you put it before?
Yeah. I mean, I feel just really lucky, especially to have a full time job in Taos that like I enjoy and that is like life sustaining and that I get to do something that I feel like I'm being helpful in the community and like but yeah, I don't know, I guess like I've learned along the way that yeah, it's rare for folks to have a full-time position in adult ed, especially if they're just an instructor basically. So, yeah, I mean, it's been like ups and downs obviously and at times it's been like, "Oh my god, I'm so busy. I don't even know what to do." Because at one point we were trying 3 IETs and I was teaching HSE and then just kinda riding the wave of, like, and then one semester we just had, like, 1 IET, and it's just, like, it's never the same, like, from semester to semester, it's like I mean, it has been in terms of the IETs that we've had. We've had those pretty solid, like, consistently for maybe I think this is the 2nd year, but it's I don't know, a lot of change. It's never the same.
Yeah. It sounds almost like a roller coaster.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, that sounds like it could be like a pretty heavy loads just like at different times too if you're teaching multiple classes. Incredible. So what we're getting into is just again, we want to focus on science teaching because I am generalizing here, but from when I was teaching I saw or, again, this is all anecdotal, it's very tunnel vision of what I experienced, but talking to other instructors, a lot of the focus was primarily on reading, writing, I guess to a lesser extent, the grammar, because the social studies and the science or in math, sorry, reading, writing, math, because the social studies and science tests used aspects of both of those. So the idea being it's like we're going to spend a lot of time on the primary subjects with the different contexts. So it's interesting just to talk to you about like and being like a subject specific that isn't just, someone's the language arts teacher, someone's the math teacher, like that, like science. That's really cool. So when we were when we were emailing you, Nina, of like, hey, we should talk to you about this thing. One of the things that really sparked my interest or my attention and that building that conversation, I'm trying to figure out, we want to talk about this subject and that you have a science background. And the term you used was scientific literacy. So that's why I want to start right at the beginning is what is scientific literacy and what does scientific literacy mean for adult ed students?
Yeah. I don't know the exact definition off the top of my head, but I think of it as like the way we think of any kind of literacy, like health literacy, digital literacy. I think of scientific literacy as like being able to be in the world and like understand what's going on, especially as it pertains to what scientific research says about something or like just like being informed and especially being able to have the understanding of how to interpret like what's going on in the world because I can't even think of a single like big world issue that isn't connected to like science in some way. Like even just coming out of like the pandemic, or climate change or sustainability or like human rights and global health or like whatever. So I basically just I can easily think of an example of not having scientific literacy, and this is like just what we've seen just in the world, people who are like, "Oh, there's no way that XYZ is real because XYZ, or the earth is like this because of like this, or what? I don't I don't want medicine, because of XYZ." Like, and like, not to say anyone's opinion is wrong, but like I think people can make more informed decisions and more informed opinions, and probably have a better understanding of the world if they have more of a understanding of like, what is science, how does science work, and what does it achieve, and how does it inform everything in our lives, because it does, and so I try to focus more on that. I don't know if I always succeed, because sometimes it's hard to just like juggle all the things that like students are supposed to learn, but it never appealed to me to teach science the way that I learned science in high school, of just like, these are the organelles in a cell. Like, I would much rather have students understand like the broad idea of like, what do we even mean when we say science, and what is the point of science? Like, I have a friend who is a philosophy and like political science professor, and I remember her telling me like, when I was in high school, I was so not interested in science because it was just like, memorize this, memorize this. And I felt like there was like no connection to me or my life, or why does this even matter? And then now she's actually like very interested in like the scientific process and like scientific thinking. And because now that she's, an academic and whatever, she sees how that informs like everything in society in a lot of ways. So that's how I feel also, like, except for I really liked science growing up, but I want it to feel relevant to my students, and I want them to be able to be in the world and like be able to contribute like to conversations, and like know, like, have like a solid foundation, like if somebody is talking about like, here's what we know about climate change, and here's why, like, I want them to understand like, there's this scientific process, and people do this scientific process so that they can learn things and understand things in the world. So I don't know, that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, I think I wanna pull it. I wanna try to summarize, if that's
Okay.
okay. So what you're saying is scientific literacy is having the content knowledge, but also be able to take that content knowledge and be able to interpret the world that is affected by that. So it's not just memorizing the organelles of a cell necessarily, but it is understanding how the cells work and why we need to know how cells work.
I would say yeah, but I would actually go further. And the way I think of it is like understanding why, I guess, like why science exists and like why it's important, and like how it shapes the world.
Mhm.
So, like, I think of someone who might be really easily convinced of something that is really inaccurate, because they might have like a low level of scientific literacy. Like, they might not understand like, what is the point of science, and how do we like actually know things because of it. They might just think like, oh, science is just some stupid thing that I had to take a class on. It's like kind of the opposite of that. So yeah, what you're saying though is true too, actually.
So
Yeah.
so it's not only understanding, but also being able to interpret how science has an effect on the world around us
Yeah.
and what that means for us to interact in the world. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I think that is a very basic building block of literacy in general. It's
Mhm.
not just being able to read, but reading. I think I'm definitely messing this up, but I'm thinking of a Frere, like Paulo Freire kind of idea of like read the word to read the world.
Yeah, totally.
Well,
Yeah.
I think to add to that, one thing that I was really thinking about was this idea of taking information that you receive and thinking about it critically, questioning it, and looking at it in the framework of a scientific mind, regardless of the content. So, this could be
Yeah.
anything. It could be the news that comes into our world, whether we're watching the news or getting something from social media. It could be
Mhm.
reading a health screening. It could be anything that is applicable to our everyday lives, but questioning things instead of just taking things as they are And I'm sure that, anybody who's been on social media for any amount of time knows that it's very easy to just take something that you read and take it 100% at face value, when really it's a good practice to not. And that's what really stuck out to me about what you were talking about, is just this particular skill that I think is so crucial for any adult at
Uh-huh.
any age, is this idea of thinking critically and questioning things and not just taking them 100% at face value right from the get-go.
Yeah. Okay. The way you said it is perfect. Just let's emphasize that in the recording.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think it's all related. We're
Absolutely.
taking
Mhm.
exactly what you say and just,
Yeah.
giving
Mhm.
it our lens. I also think of it as something I've read ages ago that I always think about every once in a while, of the why of it all. Like what
Mhm.
you're talking about is that critical interpretation. That's more of like a almost a philosophical point. It's like the what and how something works would be the science, and like the why we do it, that's the philosophy.
Mhm.
And yeah, and I mean, we if we look at like older philosophers, I think the thing that comes to mind really quick for some reason, Rousseau, who was a scientist. A
Mhm.
lot of them were scientists, and they were writing this stuff about what they do and why they do it, and interpreting why we learn in certain ways or why we understand things in certain ways. And that's very tied.
Oh
It's
yeah.
we think of
Well,
it as separate, but they used to be together. Like a philosopher would be a doctor of scientist or whatever.
yeah. Well, that was my
Mhm.
my double major in college was like biology and philosophy. So
Oh, there you go.
So
yeah,
there you go hand in
yeah.
hand.
And I
Mhm.
can't. It's like annoying because I can't help but like infuse that sometimes into HSE, and I'm like, no, I don't really know if I need to be going that far. Like one time, I kind of went into a whole like, okay, this lesson is going to be about what is science and why science. And then I think I kind of lost some of the students. I had one student who's like so into it, and then the rest, I was like, okay, you know what? I don't know how much this is helping my students, so I'm going to scale this back a little bit. Like I only have them for so many hours. I want them to be able to like get what they need to get to pass their science high set, but like there is a balance of like it never sits well with me to be like I'm only preparing them for the test. Like that's what I mean about like the scientific literacy. I'm like, and that's like the teaching skills that matters thing too. Like I want them to not only be able to do well on the test, but also just like it also has to do with like civics, almost like being an informed citizen, like being an informed person, like we could go into one of my activities and lessons like that would connect to that, but I want to like maybe let you both go where you're going to go with it first. So
No, I thank you. I love that. That is also something hard, and I still, even though I'm not in the classroom anymore, I struggle with that. Just the stuff I do at Propel is like, what is too deep
mhm.
that I'm gonna lose people, but I don't wanna give them a surface level kind of transactional, here's A to B. That transactional, I don't mean that in necessarily a negative way. It is important, but I think this is also something that we struggle with as a field too, is like, you can't quite teach to the test because they need stuff beyond that. But at the same
Exactly.
time, a big reason why they're joining is because they wanna pass this test. And
Mhm.
that
Right.
balance is really
Mhm.
hard.
Mhm.
Especially since what we know about learning too is it can't necessarily just be how to pass a test, because you're not that's not really that's a one part of the bigger picture.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
but very good points. I think that for anybody that's a hard thing to balance.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So you mentioned this a little bit, but I was hoping to get more into it. So you mentioned that teaching scientific literacy, but framing it in current issues or relevant issues to the lives of your students. And can you
Mhm.
give us some examples of current and relevant issues and how you integrate that in your science teaching?
Yeah, this is what I'm really proud of. I'm really proud of these. So like okay, one of them was a dual language arts and science lesson or like set of lessons. So they were focusing on writing persuasive essays and learning how to do that, but also the science component was wildfires and like wildfire science. So it was reading a couple of different articles that like showed different perspectives on wildfires because we had just had the wildfires here. So I wanted them to learn like like I just printed off some stuff from like the Forest Service on like what is wildfire mitigation? What are controlled burns? Or I forget the other word for it. Like when they set a part of the forest on fire on purpose to like help mitigate the risk of wildfires, right? Like, so I wanted them to learn about that. And then I wanted them to learn about the pros and cons and write an essay on, do you think we should conduct controlled burns? Why or why not? Obviously, it's really deep and you could spend an entire semester on that. We just went kind of shallow with it, but I also had them read an article from the Taos News that was more journalistic. And yeah, and then we did like, I think we did like a quick 15 to 20 minutes on like what is combustion and what happens when, what's the chemistry equation when you have a combustion reaction. And we didn't really have enough time to do that. So I can't say I'm confident that students came out of that being like, oh, I totally understand, because that requires knowledge of what's a molecule, what's an atom, right? But like, I try to like put in a little bit of everything. And I feel really proud of it because I think they got some vocabulary to be able to talk about like, well, what are two different approaches, or not even two, but like, what are the different schools of thought on wildfire management? And like, at least to know, like there's these different perspectives and so that they could talk about their experiences. Like it was really interesting to read some of the essays because like students had some really personal stuff to share in some of them. And yeah, and just to see like what conclusion they came to just based on like what we read. So I feel like that's a good example to start with. I have another example too, but
No, that's excellent. I think that that's really interesting to balance kind of many different things, but they're still really tied to one, what's in the world around them, and using the resources, not just the science articles or persuasive essay, but also using the Taos newspaper, which maybe they pick up themselves. So that's fascinating. No, I love it.
Thanks. I think to add to that, for one, the relevance was like top because every year folks in Taos, Las Vegas, anywhere in northern New Mexico are dealing with those wildfires. And so, what really stuck out to me about what you said was that there were students sharing a lot of very personal stories in their essay writing. And that is a really good gauge, I think, as far as relevance. And I think this is more of an opinion on my part, but I just think that when you do that, when you add that relevance, especially when it's that close to home, it
mhm.
could entice them to dig deeper, look further, and go beyond that one day that you did that chemistry lesson. Maybe that really did spark some interest and made them go, okay, I want to look into this more because, yeah, this happened to me. This happened to my family. Or I know somebody who works for fire and rescue. I know, or I want to do that as a career. So I love
Mhm.
that example so
Thanks.
much.
I know I haven't done it in a really long time and I feel like I should bring it back. I'm always like, "Oh, I'm gonna bring back this lesson this session." And then, just riding the roller coaster, there's always like so many different things to juggle. So,
Oh,
yeah.
there is.
Yeah, you know. Yeah.
But, I think this really leads well into the next question because, as I mentioned, when something is relevant, it could lead to a potential career pathway, or it could be something that you are looking at purposefully in that way. So, how are you integrating your science curriculum so that it relates to career pathways?
Okay, so my strongest example is related to healthcare. Possibly, it's just because it's the easiest for me to do since I've been immersed in the CNA and EMT IETs. It's kinda like the low-hanging fruit. I'm like, "Okay, I know I can do this." So, we've been doing a unit, like, I think it probably takes 6 hours because 'cause it'll be, like, 1 3-hour a day and 1 3-hour day because our that's how long I have the students for. So, it's just, like, what are vital signs? And how do you take vital signs? And that's like healthcare skill 101. Like if you want to be a CNA, if you want to be an EMT, you need to know how to take vital signs and be really good at it. And that's like your automatic, like you have to have that baseline skill. And then I thought, okay, well, that's fun because it's hands on. And students get to use like healthcare tools. Like they get to put on a stethoscope, they can like put on a blood pressure cuff, they can, use their own hands to like take someone's pulse. And then I figured, okay, well, that's healthcare, skill right there. And then connecting it to like some biology concepts, like what do we even mean when we're talking about blood pressure? What's systolic? What's diastolic? Well, what does that even refer to? Which honestly, my HSE students, they have actually caught on to this stuff so quickly, and it has taken the CNA students much longer. I think maybe because the CNA students have so many more things that they're learning at the same time. But I mean, even it was a light bulb moment when I had a student who he's pretty young too, but he was kind of checked out. And then the second day we were learning about vital signs and like diving more into like, well, what is heart rate? And what do we mean by blood pressure? Like, well, we have to talk about like, we have all these blood vessels in our body. And then the student all of a sudden had all these questions and he was like, wait, so like, do we have them like all the way throughout, like in our feet and like in our legs and our arms? And I'm like, yeah. And then like I was like, you know what? Let's pull up a diagram of the circulatory system. Like, let's look at this. And it was so exciting. And then I was just like, okay, this is so cool. Cause if I had just done like today we're gonna learn about the circulatory system, like I don't think it would have sparked the same interest. But like connecting it to a real world thing. And then for the second part of that, like I think the last hour and a half on the second day, they explored a website. I forget. I think it's called like Explore Healthcare Careers or something. And it's so cool. You can look at like this just vast like map of all these different careers that are related to healthcare. Or you can just click in this little like toolbar, like how many years of education and salary. So you can choose like, I want to find something that only takes 2 years of education and pays 40K or whatever. And then it'll show you everything that comes up. And then you can like click on it and see what they do. So we did that as a class and I had the students do a little assignment on that. So yeah, I don't know. I hope it kind of sparked some interest for some people and maybe help some of the students like get interested in like or get more information about potential career. I mean, there's always those students who are like, oh no, I already know I want to like own my own business or be an automotive or I want to work in the forest service. Like there's always those students. But then I try to still remind them like, well, why do you think it is good to know this stuff? Like, okay, yeah, high set, but also like understanding your own body, helping out a relative, like, some people are like, "Oh yeah, my grandma has to get her blood pressure checked," or I kind of ended up accidentally and fortunately tying it to like health literacy because when I was sort of part of this community health worker IET for a quick second, there were all these examples of like horrible things that went wrong when people didn't have the vocabulary to know what the doctor was telling them. So, like, this woman like had a hysterectomy and she didn't know what a hysterectomy meant, but she signed the paperwork for it. And then the surgery was over and she learned what had happened to her. And so like that was the example from community health worker. So like I brought that up with my students and I was like, okay, guys, if you can remember hypertension, hypotension, you already have like a leg up because when you go to the doctor, if they just tell you you have hypertension and maybe you don't feel comfortable asking them what that is, like now you know, and you can like at least have that and hopefully not ever be in this situation of like, I was given this medication and I don't know why. I'm not really sure why. I just know I'm supposed to take it. So like kind of connecting it to health literacy. Cause I asked students, I was like, have you ever been in the doctor's office or whatever? And they like tell you something and you actually don't know what they mean. And they're like, yeah, definitely. So yeah, kind of tried to, that was like an accident, like a happy accident that it turned into that too. But just, yeah, encompassing all those things. They don't always all come together, but like the last time I did this, it worked really well. So yeah. Every
Wow.
time, every time I repeat a lesson, it like gets better. I'm like, oh, cool. The first time was a little bit of a flop. And this time, hey, look, we added in health literacy by accident. So
Oh, I've been there.
yeah.
But I mean, it sounds like, the amount of questions that you get, or even just the directions that that the lesson goes, like you said, by happy accident
Mhm.
is, I think, a sign that it is applicable to them in a
Mhm.
really good way. And I think that, you gave us already just this excellent example, or even a couple, of how you integrate the career pathways piece into your lessons. And earlier, when you were talking about the wildfire lesson and you were integrating that with essay writing, that was also a really great example of cross curricular lesson planning.
That example you gave, Nina, about teaching a lesson a second time and then learning from it. I feel like that's something that is one of the symptoms that we have of not thinking of ourselves sometimes as adult learners, of like we teach and we learn that repetition is really key to better understanding, right, for students, but we don't think of ourselves as practitioners, right?
Mhm.
And that is so key because you're the constant. So like these students, they'll move on, drop out, whatever, but you're the one that's still there. So like you're learning too. You're learning how to do this better
Mhm.
because of that practice. And practicing in general is a part of that learning process. So I just
Yeah.
want to comment on that, of like that is such a really great point and an illustration as a teacher of like how you can continue to learn, and that is a part of what you do. It's not necessarily going off to do PD or something. It's really being
Mhm.
reflective and being a reflective teacher.
Thanks.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like sometimes, like, I feel a little bit, like, bruised, I'm like, "Oh, man, I thought this was gonna work so well," and it really just felt like, I don't know, something didn't click, and then, yeah, getting the chance to try it again and tweak it, and then, like, yeah, just having things click, or, like, changing things midstream because of an idea or a question a student has, like, I'm very open to that. That's why sometimes it's hard for me to, like, plan as far out as, like, weeks, because 'cause I'm like, "Well, what if students actually express interest in this? And I wanna, like, follow that." So then, even if we had this topic on the syllabus, I kinda might wanna scrap that because I wanna do what they're interested in, like, so sometimes it's kinda hard, but, like, yeah, no, like, getting the chance to try things again and again, and, like, not to say that, like, the students are part of an experiment, because that sounds, like, disrespectful, but, like, it kind of is an experiment in some ways, because it's like, "Well, we'll try this. We'll see what happens." "Okay, next time I try it, I'm gonna change this element and see if that works better," so.
I wouldn't say it's disrespectful, but that it is an experiment. I kind
Mhm,
of I mean, they're not necessarily tools, they're part of the environment, right? The learning
mhm,
environment that you create. So I appreciate that, and that thought. And you spoke of two skill sets that are really important for instructors too, which is it's hard to teach, is
mhm,
or do professional development on, is flexibility and adaptability.
mhm,
And especially adapting to your student interests, because while that is a part of the andragogical process, there's still that, or framework, whatever we call it, there's still that struggle, right? Of having to stick to the material, but also you already have you're capture their attention and their
mhm,
engagement, which
mhm,
helps with that learning transfer.
You've already given us a lot of really great examples of how you integrate career pathways into your lesson planning, as well as how you create cross curricular lessons. For example, you talked about your wildfire lesson that you incorporated essay writing into that. And so you mentioned that you had some other lessons maybe that you wanted to mention. So I just wanted to know if there were any other examples of either cross curricular or integrated lessons that you wanted to share.
yeah. The one that I'm also very proud of is, okay, so have you guys seen alkaline water on, like, the shelves in supermarkets and stuff? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So, like, we did an investigation about that. So, I kind of framed it as, like, consumer literacy and health literacy. Like, I used those words with the students. I was like, "What do y'all think about this? Like, what do you think consumer literacy is? Like, what does it look like?" So then, yeah, so then this was just really fun. And I think the students had a lot of fun with it, because it felt like we were doing an investigation of, like, trying to figure out, like, if we were being lied to by like water companies. So I brought in different bottled water from, like, I just bought it like Albertsons or whatever, and I got reimbursed. um, so don't worry, no. But I just brought in some different kinds of bottled water, and like some of them were what's labeled as alkaline water, like it'll say like pH 9.5. And then I brought in like Dasani, and one of them was just like Ozark Spring, and then just like different kinds of bottled water that you can buy, and especially the ones that are labeled as alkaline water or like, perfect pH, whatever. And then we learned about the concept of pH. Okay, what's pH? Okay, there's acidic and there's alkaline. Okay, here's the pH scale. All right. What's something that's super acidic? Stomach acid. Coffee is acidic, what's something alkaline? Whatever. We like looked at examples. And then we're like, okay, so what's up with this whole alkaline water thing? So first, let's see if the pH is actually what it says it is on the bottle. That's the first thing. So that's kind of like, a scientific investigation, like finding out what really is the truth here. So we have little just pH tester strips. They're not like super high quality ones, but they worked well enough. And then yeah, the students just like for each kind of water, they just put the little test strip in, you look at the color, you match it, write down what pH it is. And then we looked at, okay, well, this says 9.5 on the bottle. What did we get? Oh, we actually got 7.5, Huh. Okay. And then so we did that for all of them. And then we like discussed what that meant. And then I also had them do, and this part was a little bit harder because it required a bit more math skill, but calculating the cost per ounce or per milliliter. So like the bottle of, 9.5 pH is like 1 liter and it costs like 350 or whatever. So, how much is it per milliliter? And then comparing all of the water by how much they cost per milliliter and being like, okay, well, this is the most expensive. And the pH isn't what it said on the bottle. So what do you think? Do you think is it worth it? What do you think? So that's the main crux of it. And another time I did it, I think maybe the first time I did it, I had way more time with the students because right now we're combining like multiple subjects into one. But when I had more time with them and we could kind of just do science, we veered into the territory of like evaluating like health claims. So like doing some research and like, okay, is there scientific evidence showing that alkaline water is better for you? What are the health claims? Oh, look, some of the health claims are saying it'll heal your digestive issues, it'll reverse aging, blah, blah, blah. So then, all right, well, you guys do your own finding of different articles and different like studies. And here's an article that's scientific and is peer reviewed or whatever. And here's one that's just from someone's blog. And then after they had done a lot of stuff on that, they actually did like a little mock debate. And one team had to argue that like alkaline water is just as good as they say it is, and one group had to say, or like had to argue for like, no, actually, like those are questionable claims. So yeah, that was when I had a lot more time and we could like really build up to that. But now since we're doing things a little bit shorter, we were just doing the part where we like, it was kind of just like a one-off kind of thing. So, but it was really fun. The most exciting part was when I was co-teaching with Erin, because actually it was science and language arts combined at that time. And yeah, so Erin and I were in the classroom together, and one of the bottles, she noticed it said on there, pH is like produced through like proprietary something something and cannot be measured accurately without like a pre-calibrated pH meter or whatever. And we're like, whoa, that is super sketchy. Like, what's going on here? So it was really fun. I felt like the students were super excited about that because we felt like we had discovered something, So
That's wild. Okay, so I'm trying to like bring it all together. Okay, so it's like we have the science with the pH stuff.
yeah.
We have that argument, which could count as part of like persuasive writing. We
Mm-hmm.
also have that measurement, that's math.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously reading,
Mhm.
reading the bottle and critically thinking about how things are written. That is
Mhm.
great. That is a lot altogether. Like, roughly how long? I know you said this was technically a longer piece, but like, how long did that take you in the past?
When we did all of that, including the part of like evaluating health claims and stuff, I want to say maybe it took like 2 or 3 3-hour blocks. Cause I think at that point we were doing like kind of a integrated combined language arts science where Erin and I were teaching together and we had the same group twice a week for 3 hours. Right now it's half of that and it's just a different structure based on just how many students we have, stuff about the science, high set, whatever. But so I maybe took like 6 to 9 hours of class time total. That was for the full extent of it. Yeah.
Wow. Now, that's
And
so interesting.
when you were talking about, like, the debate part of it, were they doing a verbal debate?
Yeah. So I gave them I forget if I let them choose teams or no, I think I assigned teams, which next time I would do differently, but also it depends on who's in the class. But like so I gave them time to like look at their articles and their resources and kind of confer with each other and then do like a verbal like, okay, this side you get to give your argument. Okay, this team you give your argument. Okay, now you get to respond to them. What do you say? Now, okay, what do you have to say to that, you know? So I was really impressed with them.
Yeah,
That is
so
really neat.
yeah, when I say writing, I was thinking not necessarily essay, but more like organization. And there had to be some writing and communicating to talk about this stuff in debate anyway, right? So,
Yeah. Well, I think I had them write. It's like all blending together, but I think in that same unit, I had them do a little bit of writing on like a miniature persuasive essay of like, what's your opinion on alkaline water? Do you
that's
think the health claims are true? You know, yeah.
that's great. It's a great way to answer that question.
It's
Yes,
my
absolutely.
proudest lesson. I'm really proud of it.
As you should be. And, the reason why I asked about the verbal debate is because there's public speaking skills in there as well.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
everybody speaks during a debate, especially if it's in teams, but,
Hmm.
people that do have to be mindful of time. They have to be mindful of getting everything out. And then, of course, that skill of being able to respond to arguments that you had not previously heard is
Hmm.
something that I think we don't think about enough when we think about formal debate.
Yeah.
So I love that. That was such a wonderful example. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. And now that you say that, when we did that activity, this is like a cool kind of coincidence, but one of the groups was 5 people and 3 of them were super introverted and were like, nope, I'm not talking. And 2 of them had to kind of pick up the slack and like do the talking. And then one of those two like really stepped up to the plate and he actually like wears sunglasses at all times because of a medical problem. So it was so cool seeing him like, and he was kind of quiet, but it was so cool seeing him like really step up even, we couldn't see like really see his eyes, but he was like really doing it. Like he was giving a really like professional, like well-spoken, explanation and argument. And then he actually was our graduation speaker. I just realized that. Yeah.
I
So
gave him some practice already right
I
there.
hope so. Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So, this is again like super fascinating. We're both really excited about your lesson. So one thing we also talked about before, we got started was that technically someone can pass the HSC science with NRS level 3, right? Which is, do we still use GLE, Jamie? Is that like still a thing?
I wonder, I don't know if that's a question for me because I haven't used
I've
taken
never
full
heard of it.
grade level equivalent. I think
So
that's I don't think that that's used anymore, but I'm not 100% sure.
yeah, because I was saying, because like I know that we have up to from 1, the NRS is like from 1 to 6, right? And 6s are kind of rare, or at least 6s in both, but technically anyone can really pass a test with like 5 or 6. But when you go to 3, that's kind of a lower reading level, right?
Hmm.
So what I'm trying to get at basically is what does it mean for an instructor who, it's something also we talked about, that teaching or planning HSC content when, especially for science, when technically the lower level students can pass it. So that might mean that you don't. I am really messing this up, but like I guess what I'm trying to get at is like the idea is that like the lower level students can pass it, so maybe you don't spend as much time on it.
Yeah.
Which is, it makes sense. I mean, I'm not trying to be critical of practitioners that do that, especially with the time constraints that we have and the limited amount of time we have with students anyway. But
Mhm.
what does that mean for instructors who are playing that content with knowing that technically I don't need to spend that much time on this, or for the students? Like, what do you think?
Yeah. So what we did was Kylie and Aaron, I don't know if they went to a conference or if they had like some conversations with Katya or whatever, but then they were informed, I think by Katya, like, you might want to just have all your NRS threes and reading students just go ahead and take the science high sit. Then you can get your MSG, then they can get some momentum and some confidence, get the ball rolling, like whatever, whatever. So then they were like, really sorry, Nina, but this is the reality. I'm like, I know, it's okay, it's okay. And they weren't saying like, don't teach science, but they were like, hey, what if you just spend the first 2 weeks on science related stuff and, tie it to career pathways? I'm like, yeah, totally. That's kind of what I was supposed to be doing in the first place anyways, science career pathways. So yeah, it's totally fine. That'll give us time for other stuff. So it kind of made things a little bit easier because I didn't have to focus so much on science. I mean, this is only the second semester that we're implementing this. And it made it easier because we're actually including social studies now. Before, we didn't have any social studies content because we were so focused on language arts, writing, and reading, and then with a little bit of science. And so now I'm kind of more just teaching a lot of social studies with science, like healthcare related career pathway stuff for the first 2 weeks. And Kristen Cowan, she and I split it up. So she's teaching the reading, writing, like really focusing on writing and grammar and reading comprehension, like that stuff. And I'm focusing more on social studies. So, I mean, it's kind of been nice because I hadn't taught social studies before and I'm really enjoying it. And I'm finding ways where students are actually getting really engaged and really excited. So, I don't know. It's honestly been kind of a good thing. I mean, I feel very sad that the science high set is so easy that, like, you don't have to even necessarily have any scientific literacy. You just have to be at a certain reading level. Doesn't mean that they're not going to like come out with like strong science skills in their HSE. But to me, I do feel like the bar should be set a little bit higher, especially because, like so many of our issues in the world like require some scientific literacy. So just for people to be informed, to be able to like make decisions that are informed, like I would like them to be able to have more time like learning science or at least gaining scientific literacy. Like I honestly do not care if somebody knows the organelles in the cell. Like no offense, like biology, whatever, but like I want them to be able to know, okay, why is the CDC making this decision for global health or for like public health? What is that based off of? You know what I mean? Like that, like I want them to be able to understand stuff like that. Or at least if you see a graph like in the newspaper, like understand it. So anyway, that's what I've been trying to do, and it makes me sad that I feel like the bar is so low for the reading high set. I mean, for the science high set, but it's also really nice to prioritize social studies more in class. And it's really nice to see students pass a high set early on and, kind of like get more confidence and just to see them, pass a high set. It's nice. So, but yeah, I'm kind of like, wait, what the heck?
If only we
No,
had more time, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
you're speaking to a lot of truth here, because I can think of examples of just how some basic scientific literacy could have helped people I know. I mean, one example is when the COVID vaccines came out. One of the fears of some people in my circles were like, "Well, we don't know what's in it. We just had this." I'm like, "Well, actually,
Mhm, mhm.
COVID is a form
Yeah.
of this virus that they've been working on this. So it actually isn't just something new, strange Frankenstein creation. It's like it's been worked on
Yeah.
already for years. It's just that we're hearing about it now.
Right.
Also, that a lot of vaccines are suspended in eggs, and if you don't know that and you have an egg allergy, and if someone doesn't ask you that,
Mhm.
right? So there's a lot of this,
Right.
like, little stuff, and it's hard to I think it's hard as educators of, like, how can we prepare for that while also prepare them for the primary need, right? Because
Mhm.
I mean, these are also very, like, individual questions too of, like, very specifically know that vaccines are suspended in eggs or stuff
Mhm.
like that, right?
But,
It
like,
seems so much random.
but if they can have the understanding of, like, here's what scientific research looks like and what it aims to achieve, like, it's not just, like, a one-off, right? It's like people work on problems for years and decades and, tweak it and whatever, like, just to have that understanding maybe could help? But yeah,
Oh,
no, I totally
absolutely.
hear what you're saying, like, yeah.
It's one of those kind of mixed bag things where you have to make hard choices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just a yeah, like I said, just a mixed bag, but there's always considerations, right?
Yeah.
So, you mentioned one resource about what you use to teach science and social studies, but can you tell us some of the resources that you use and that you would recommend to people teaching science or social studies?
Yeah. One of them that I like is PBS, like, educator resources. I forget what it's called, but, like, I get their newsletter, and, like, they'll just have, every week, like, different resources, and I think I've used some about, like, we were doing something on, like, kinda geography, like, what's latitude and longitude, and I really liked the little set of resources PBS had on that.
Is
I
it PBS Learning Media?
Yeah, I think it's that one, yeah, PBS Learning Media.
Yeah.
I Oh my gosh, I've gotten such great stuff at conferences, like, the people who do conference sessions on HSE science have helped me so much, like, I remember I think her name is Katie, and she's from Arizona. She gave a conference presentation, I think at COAB last year, and she just, like, gave us this really awesome lesson that we could essentially use on the solar eclipse and, like, how to tie it to all these different things, and I just used that. I was just like, "This is so cool," and I tweaked it, and I added, like, a digital literacy thing and had the learners make, like, a little infographic on Canva, like, a things you need to know about, like, solar eclipses or whatever, but it was so cool. It also had, like, a cultural kinda piece about, like, being aware that different cultures have different perspectives on solar eclipses. So, yeah, conference sessions. Sometimes I find stuff like we made solar ovens, and I found so many different lesson plans because it's like a common, like, STEM activity. But I think one of them was from called, like, teachengineering.com or something, and it had this really cool graphic organizer on, like, the engineering cycle or process of, like, start with an idea, prototype, try it, keep going, try it again, like, switch it, like, iterate, whatever, like, so that was a cool resource. I feel kind of bad that I haven't used, like, any, like, actual published, like, high set prep materials, but I do use practice questions from the high sets. I have pulled questions from the high set practice tests that are free online, and I'll use those. And, like, this session, I used one question and then I, like, kinda made my own question that was, like, a different version of that question. So, definitely the science high set practice test. ONET online for looking at, like, careers and doing career pathway stuff. The, Health Explore Healthcare Careers website. Yeah, there are probably a lot more, and I'm just forgetting, but I would say there isn't, like, one that I always use consistently. Maybe the PBS one, though, and then I get the Edutopia newsletter, and I just love the resources they have in there. They're not always, like, specific to science, but, they'll have articles about, like, different approaches. I do like the TSDM toolkit too, like, they have the lesson about the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, and I kinda got some ideas from there, so
Okay, those are some good stuff. I pulled them up on my browser so we can add them later. Jamie, I'll
Awesome,
send you an
yeah,
email.
you could
Uh,
definitely add those.
yeah, we're trying. Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
probably
that's great.
forgetting some, but
Yeah, thank you. Oh, man. I do have a question. I hope it doesn't take too far away. And
Mhm.
it's but you mentioned that you got some great material at conferences. And
Yeah.
this is tied to the next question anyway. So like the question was really how do you vet resources for teaching? And first I want you to answer if you could like when you're going to a conference, like how do you choose sessions? And
Mhm.
how do you know after you attended that this is something like how do you vet it and make sure this is or, know that this is something you can use with your students.
For a while, I was going to like almost any science related HSE session I could find at a conference just because there isn't that much out there about teaching science HSE. And then talking to instructors like Echo and Katie from Arizona, they're really cool and like-minded because they're interested in environmental like stuff and like integrating that. So like I think I've gone to a couple of sessions of theirs at different conferences, but yeah, I don't know. I guess the way that I vet them is like to me, like if the instructor seems to care about it, like not necessarily it doesn't have to be passionate, but like if they've tried it with if they've used this with their students and they seem like enthusiastic about it and they have things to say about like, look, here's pictures of what we did and here's how it went and here's where things like I would have changed. Like anything where it's just like a cookie cutter, like here, take these worksheets and do this. Like to me, I'm like, nah, maybe that would be good, but that's not really interesting to me. But if the instructor is like, yeah, I tried this and here's how it went and here's what we learned from it and like that and they're excited about it too. Like to me that's like a good sign. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, I want to try that. And then for vetting resources, do you mean also like vetting like the online resources too or
Yeah, that's a part of that too. I was just curious about the conference thing because we just
yeah.
went to a conference. We saw you at Mount
Yeah.
Plains.
Yeah.
And also it's been part of our conversations a lot at Propel of like I guess this is something we'll probably hit later down the line, but so the questions were like, when we go to conference session, we get really excited. But
Mm,
do we actually get stuff from it? Like, do we change our practice from these new ideas? And
right.
it's not an yes or no question necessarily, but it's something that we're really just considering as a
Yeah.
whole of like that form of professional learning. That's why I wanted to ask that. So thank you. But part of that question, as away from the conferences is like, so how do you vet your resources that you find yourself then? So like your online stuff or books or
Yeah.
whatever you use.
I don't know. I mean, obviously, if it comes from like a really solid, reliable educational resource, like, PBS or, if it's part of like resources on like links or something like Teach Engineering, or like NGSS or like I think NASA had like some cool lesson plans. So, like stuff like that. But I'm not against trying a lesson if it's not from some well-known educational organization too, but I just kind of like it's really hard for me to follow anything like cookie cutter. Like I just can't. So I always end up like kind of changing things myself anyway. So it's more just like taking inspiration, or if I'm specifically like, "Oh, I really need a video that is explaining this thing really well." Oh, I like using Edpuzzle. I love Edpuzzle. I learned about that at a conference. I went to a whole pre-conference like half day session on Edpuzzle and I have used it like ever since. Like it's great. I love it. So, but yeah, you still have to vet even the videos that are in there because the videos in there can just be from YouTube. So like I'm not going to show a video from YouTube that's not, reliable information, obviously. Like,
Right. Okay. So it sounds like that you're kind of using a few different tools here. Is that first
oh,
determining that yes, go ahead.
I remembered the one I forgot.
Okay.
The one I forgot is New York Times, and it's different. I think it's what's called What's Going On in This Graph. New York Times, What's Going On in This Graph. And it's so cool because they have so many different graphs, charts, diagrams, whatever, visual presentations of data. And I've actually done a whole unit on like data visualized and like what are different ways that it is visualized and how do we interpret it. they have such cool graphs on there, and you can find ones that are really interesting to learners, like based on, what the issue is. Or I think even once they had like a Valentine's Day themed one, and there was this really cool graph word chart cloud that were like words that were used most often in like literature. I don't even remember exactly what it was, but what's going on in this graph. And they have like guides, like guided questions for educators to use. Like, if you're using this graph, here are some questions you can use to guide the lesson. So I love that one.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I got it all down. The
Okay.
list. But yeah, so what I'm trying to just like summarize here. So first of all, you check to make sure it's a source that has its own sources, so it has a reputation, it's reputable. You also don't follow by the book, you kind of integrate it with your own ideas and curriculum.
Mhm.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I
Yeah.
know that's really short because you talked about a
No.
lot of different things. I
Yeah.
was like, let's condense it a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so a part of that, I would say that's also your own content knowledge. So you know science
Mhm.
well enough to be able to review this stuff and like, okay, this is something that makes sense. This is also you use the term NGSS, so the next generation science standards. So that's K to
Mhm.
12 science standards.
Yeah. And I don't use them that much, but like if I see a resource and it says like aligned with NGSS and then like lists the ones that it's aligned with, I'm like, okay, that's pretty legit.
Yeah, okay, so you're also checking for standards alignment.
Mhm.
It's though it's not the general standards that we use across the board, which is college and career readiness standards,
Mhm.
CCR standards, which is okay, they're still standards.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I'm gonna make an assumption is that when you look at the standards, you also kind of compare like, okay, this is part of what they need to know.
Mhm.
Yeah, so you're doing a lot of work here, and you're just the way you're phrasing it though is kind of like, yeah, whatever, but you're flippant, but you definitely have this competency of standards competency as well as in itself what you science literacy. So there's a lot of
Thanks.
different skills you're utilizing here that
Thanks.
you
Yeah. Well, and the last thing I should say is I also, because when you said like I'm doing things without but being flippant about it, I'm realizing, oh yeah, I am also basing stuff off of my previous jobs. So like I worked in environmental education center for like 4 years back at home in Pennsylvania. So that gave me a solid like foundation. And I can kind of compare things to that because they had like pre-written curriculum for us. So that's almost like my thing in my head that I don't think about, but it's there. So I can kind of compare things to that too. Like that was like my starting point teaching. So
right. So
yeah.
yeah, basically what you're getting at is it's a competency model. So there's 4 levels. There's unconscious incompetence, which means you do not know what you don't know
Hmm.
or what you need. You don't know what you're lacking. Then
Hmm.
there's the next level is conscious incompetence, which and by the way, this is not meant to be critical in any way. It's really
Hmm.
just determining like that kind of content knowledge. So conscious incompetence would means you know what you don't know. You know where your gaps are. Then there's conscious competence is like you're aware of what you do know and you make a concentrated effort. So where you're speaking from, Nina, is actually the final level, and it's also a mastery level, which is unconscious competence, which means
Hmm.
it comes because you've done it for so much, it comes so naturally to you. You're not actually thinking about it while you're doing it. It's just something that's in there
Yeah.
already. And yeah, so that's and it's kind of hard sometimes because when you've done it so much and so when you get to that level, it's hard to backtrack and be like, okay, these are like the actual steps I'm taking. I think that's a part of the reason why there's a struggle with math instruction of like if you're like really great at math, there's this kind of cliche of being really great at math means you're a poor teacher. But
Right.
of math, because the thing is like it comes so naturally to you, you're not taking those steps back.
Yeah.
Um yeah, so
Yeah.
it's kind of yeah, which is another huge issue. But anyway, I'm just trying to like basically give you a framework for where you're coming from. If
Yeah.
I'm not
Thanks.
taking too much of our time here. But
Yeah.
those those were our questions. And Nina, thank you so much for your time. This was really illuminating. You gave us a really great thinking about, units and planning units, as well as really interesting resources and frameworks. So thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you both. This was really fun.
Definitely, yeah. I love nerding out about science.
That's so right. Isn't it so fun? I still learn things because I'm like, okay, I kind of have a knowledge of this, but then when you have to teach it, you actually have to really learn it. So I'm still learning things. So yeah.
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's something that's really the teaching is a different skill in itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but this was great. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Connect with Adult Ed, the NMEA podcast, is a project of the Propel Professional Learning System and is funded by the New Mexico Higher Education Department's Adult Education Division. Thank you for listening.